Welcome to Unlocking the Paranormal. I am your host, Carrie. Thank you for joining me as I embark on a personal journey to unlock the secrets of the unknown and uncover the truth behind paranormal phenomena. You are listening to a Para Pals episode, short for the Paranormal Pen Pals episodes. These are the episodes where I share the stories that have been written in and submitted by listeners, or share the stories of people that I've interviewed. You can become a Paranormal Pen Pal by submitting your story to our email at unlockingtheparanormalpod@gmail.com. Feel free to share your strange encounters with ghosts, cryptids, aliens, or tell me all about your psychic abilities. Today's episode is a mix of stories. I have a couple of stories that I will read to you all first, and then I will share a clip of some stories that were shared in an interview. To start out, this first story is titled Losing Track of Time or a Witch's Spirit with Extreme Power. I grew up in Clophill, UK. Kinda England's version of Salem. They hung a lot of witches there back in the day. And there's a hanging tree with rope marks that nothing grows around to this day. The village is small and flanked by 3 forests. We used to walk my friend's dog every day in one of those 3 woods. We knew all the trails like the back of our hands. One morning, we took the dog out and decided to do a quick loop through one of the woods. It usually took about an hour. A sort of horseshoe shape. Totally clear, well-trodden path. We've walked it 100 times. But that day, as we walked into the woods, something felt weird. Just off. We got on the path and the dog, Jojo, was behaving oddly. She kept looking into the trees and growling, looking behind us and whimpering. Instead of running off like she usually did, she stuck close and behaved like she was afraid of something, but we couldn't see anything. We don't have wild cats or anything here. I remember at one point, we reached a clearing that usually looked out over farmers' fields. But it was weird because there were old barns on it suddenly. My friend and I couldn't remember ever seeing those there before, but thought maybe we just never noticed it or something. They were pretty far away. Maybe we'd never really looked. But you'd think that we would have seen them in all of our walks. We continued and eventually got to the end of the trail and left the woods and walked home. When we got there, my friend's mother was near frantic. She yelled at us for scaring her. She was about to call the police. Our hour-long walk, which felt like an hour, had taken us 6. To this day, I have no explanation for what happened or how. Is there a rational explanation? Maybe. Did my friend and I really just lose track of time on a steady hour-long walk? We didn't stop except to look at those barns. Next time we did the walk, there were no barns either. The hanging tree is in the center of that wood. This next story is shared by a person named Sebastian. They write, Before my parents got divorced, my mom and I lived in Mexico with my dad and grandparents. I really have no idea how old this place was. From what I know, my grandpa's family has owned the land of its entire area of the city for generations. It used to be a hacienda, and then they started splitting up the land amongst themselves. Some sold their share and others stayed. So the house itself was kind of a combination of some pretty old buildings and some newer buildings. Anyway, When I was about 5 years old, I started to wake my mom up in the middle of the night and tell her there was a girl in my room and wouldn't let me sleep. My mom obviously chalked it up to nightmares or perhaps me watching a scary movie and facing the consequences. She did let me stay with them, but she was weirded out by the fact that I kept doing it. She says I always seemed more annoyed than scared, so she kind of started to doubt it was a nightmare. For context, my mom is a huge skeptic and quite the level-headed person, so ghosts weren't at the forefront of her mind. My dad was the believer between the two, due to all of the things he had seen and experienced growing up in that house. So he was the one insisting it wasn't a nightmare or scary movies. My parents had a pull-out couch in their bedroom and decided to let me sleep there until I could go back to my own room. But every time I tried to sleep there, again, I would always end up in my parents' room. My mom asked me what the girl looked like, and I described her as a little bit older than me, with long dark hair that covered her face, and wearing a white dress. I said that she would wake me to play with me, and if I refused, she would turn violent and show me her face, which I said was rotting. My mom thought that maybe my sister had made me watch The Ring with her, but I insisted the girl was real, and my sister denied ever letting me watch that movie. It kept on like this until one night, my mom woke up due to hearing a girl's voice and thinking I must be having a nightmare. She says that she looked over at where I was and saw me still sleeping until a shadow passed over me, and suddenly I was being pulled up by the front of my shirt into a sitting position. I woke up screaming, with my mom rushing towards me and my dad getting up in a fury to get my grandma. It all pretty much stopped when my grandma called a priest and started leaving rosaries and icons of the Virgin Mary under my pillow. It's very horror movie-esque, but also far from the last weird thing to happen in that house. For years, my grandpa has been telling us that there's money buried under the house. It's a very common story in Mexico, and along it is the superstition that only the person that is being shown where the money is can have the money, while others say that the one that finds it will die. My grandpa, obviously, is the one being constantly accosted by the spirit of a woman, telling her where the money is. My mom used to tease him about having already lived enough, and that he should think about his grandchildren's inheritance. My grandpa was a good sport about my mom's joking, but what he's told us sounds genuinely terrifying. He was constantly being pulled out of bed, woken in the middle of the night, rolling over in bed just to see something staring at him from the dark. He even had a lot of dreams about a woman offering to tell him where the money is in exchange for 3 masses at a specific church. Sometimes she would offer him her hand, but would always cover it with her dress, which gave my grandpa pause. My grandpa did seem to agree at first, sending my grandmother to request the first 2 masses. But when she went to request the 3rd, the priest refused, unless my grandpa talked to him. My grandpa didn't want to for some reason, so the 3rd mass never happened. He would also say that he could sometimes see a specific spot on the ground glowing, but refused to say exactly where. Anytime I tell people these stories, they always seem to think I'm just retelling a scary movie, which I do think is understandable. I have a lot more stories from my cousins, my sister, my mom, and my dad, if anyone would like to hear them. But these are the bigger ones. This next story I'm about to share is titled My One Experience. I'm a 37-year-old man who is interested by the supernatural, but have only ever had one small incident potentially involving it. And this is it. So, to set the scene, it was 2004. I was 17 years old and at a friend's house who had recently gone through some tragic events. I won't go into too much as I don't want to disrespect them, but there was a tragic loss of life, of younger family members, and older in a very short space of time. Fast forward a few months and I am at my friend's house. It was a dark winter's evening and his mom and dad went out somewhere in their car, leaving us with the house to ourselves. Me and my friend were in a room upstairs, probably playing football manager. And I started being a bit silly as I was under the impression we were alone in the house. And I guess I just had a sudden burst of energy. His parents were nice people, but also very strict. I'd let my guard down as I knew they were out and was doing something silly like jumping up and down on the bed, while it was my friend's turn on the game. I can't remember exactly, but it was something across those lines. The door to the room we were in was open, and the lights were off on the upstairs landing. We had a lamp on in the room we were in, and that was the only light in that area. All of a sudden, I saw a tall, skinny figure go across the landing from one room to the other. The figure very much represented his mom's build, so I froze and felt embarrassed that she had witnessed me being silly, jumping on the bed in the spare room we were in. I assumed they must have come home without us noticing. Not unheard of in their house, as it was a brand new and not very creaky or anything. A few moments passed and I asked my friend if his parents were back. He replied confidently, "No, I don't think so." We checked out of the window and the car was still gone. My body went cold. Hairs stood up. I was so sure that I had seen somebody. I told my friend and he seemed spooked too, but I was worried I would disrespect the recent tragic events, so didn't go too much into it with him. But I have honestly never felt so spooked about anything in my life. My friend asked me about this again in the next week or so, as he claimed he too saw something. But as the tragic events were still so raw, we just didn't go much further into it at all. It was just that 100% embarrassed feeling that I had that stayed with me. The feeling that his parents had seen me acting a fool, and the emotions of feeling turned into a, well, what the fuck was it then? It is the freakiest thing I have ever witnessed, and hopefully ever will. This next story is called Gospel Music in the Woods. Alright, this one's odd and I'm more curious if anyone has experienced something similar to this. Took our sons fishing. It was a lake we had been to many times. It's in a national forest. A bit remote, but you still see occasional hikers and campers. Everything was great for the first couple hours. But after about the 4th hour of being out there, I started hearing this weird noise, almost like boots on wood behind me. So I've got my line in the water and I keep looking over my shoulder, like I'd be able to catch this mysterious boot and mysterious plank of wood it was stepping on. But really not much of a surprise, I never saw anything, and eventually started to ignore it. About half an hour went by, and all of a sudden there was this music off in the distance, and it sounded like gospel, but I couldn't make out any words. I assumed it was coming from the road, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized how removed from the road we were. Our car was parked far away, but still within eye shot, and it seemed like this weird gospel-sounding music was coming from that area. The kids were ready for lunch, and I left all the food in the car, so I thought, no better time to figure out why my car is playing music. My husband never seemed fazed by this in the slightest, so I felt kind of crazy hearing it, but my sons did too. Were just as curious as I was. So we made our way back to the car, and I realized it was, in fact, not my car at all. This music was loud, and only getting louder the closer we got to the car. But it sounded like it was all around, like wearing headphones. We're standing at the car at this point, which is completely off, radio off. So we're just standing there. We're all stuck in place trying to pinpoint where this is coming from, and even though it was loud and it did sound like gospel, you couldn't make out a single word, but you could tell it was a woman singing. I have no clue why, but I got this incredibly bad feeling. So I told the kids to get in the car. And as soon as I backed up to get my husband, the music just stopped. No fading into the distance. No, it just stopped. I got back to my husband, told the kids to stay in the car, and I said, I think it's time to go. That music made me feel like I was about to get jumped by a colt. And my husband started laughing and he said, I heard it too. I thought it was coming from the car, but thought it was odd you be listening to gospel. So I told him I had a bad feeling and wanted to leave, and he felt we did do a lot of fishing and that leaving earlier than we wanted wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. We left with no answers and me having a bad feeling for no reason. But I still find it incredibly bizarre and only take comfort in the fact that all four of us heard it. I can't describe how unsafe I felt, even though I've been in the woods my whole life and have never really had a bad feeling or felt unsafe. This was different. As we were leaving, there was no one. No vehicles, no people, no visible hikers, nothing at all. And that somehow made this whole thing worse. Now, this last part of the episode, I'm actually going to be sharing a clip from an interview that I had with a listener of the podcast. They explained that they have had numerous paranormal encounters, but they have chosen to share 3 with us today. Don't forget to show your support for this listener for being brave and coming on the podcast to share with us today. And if you have any questions for them, you can ask over on our Instagram or Facebook page or in the podcast episode comments section. Let's get into this listener's stories.
My story is when I was in grade school. We just moved to this town in Dunlap, and ever since we moved there, we had heard things falling, but the scariest time I've ever had was when I was upstairs in our bedrooms. It's like you go through one room to the next into the other room, and us kids all shared those 2 rooms. And I was cleaning, and I heard these footsteps on the steps, and it actually sounded like just really heavy footsteps. And I thought it was one of my sisters and brothers sneaking upstairs because I told Mom not to let any kids come upstairs when they got home from school because I want to clean. Well, I heard it, and so I thought I'd be smart and go sneak up to the door where the stairs comes up, and I waited until I knew the footsteps were right there so I could scare them. And I jumped out and went, rah! And there was nobody there. And I thought, I know I heard something, but, I thought, okay. So I went back to sweeping, and then it started up again. So I went back, and I tiptoed towards the door, and I stood there, and I waited until I knew whoever it was right there when I went and turned around. And I went, rah, again. And this time, there was nobody there. I'm telling you right there, I had my hair go up off my neck and thought, oh my God, I'm getting out of here. So I ran down the steps. And as I'm running, there's probably about 15, 20 steps. I got to thinking, what if the spirit is walking straight up? Now, I didn't want to walk through no ghost or anything like that, so I went along the wall and hugged the wall and ran down the steps as fast as I could. And then I ran down into where my mom and her sister was talking in the kitchen, and I said, is there any kids home? And they said, no. And so then, therefore, I was even more scared. So after that, when all of us kids would go up to bed, I got picked to be the first one to go up because my sister Dardine, who was older than me, was terrified to go upstairs. And we did that for the rest going through high school. And yes, never heard anything like that again. I mean, I've heard other noises and scratching on walls and stuff like that, but I think that one is probably the scariest that I've ever had. I've had other scares, and I guess you could say this one was really went to the heart. It was after my brother-in-law passed away, and we were at his house after the funeral with his wife and my nieces and other people, but getting ready to go to bed, and we slept down in the basement with our kids, with two of our kids, and my daughter Stacy came running down the stairs saying the rocking chair was moving. And I go, oh, you're just, you're probably dreaming. She goes, no, Mom, it's still rocking. Anyway, she come running down the steps, and then I told her, well, come lay with us. And then she had to go to the bathroom, so she was going to go to the bathroom. And then she come running back saying she seen white glow going to the bathroom. And I said, I was getting a little tired, so I went over there. And she says, he's standing right next to you. He's standing right next to you. And I go, where? And she goes, right there off to the left. So I went and I act like I was reaching out and was going to touch whatever it was on the wall. But there was nothing there. And then went on into the bathroom. There was nothing there. But as I'm coming back, I thought I did see a glow off to the right of the corner. And then by then, I was freaked out then too. So we pretty much stayed and didn't go to the bathroom for the rest of the night in the other room. Okay, this next story happened at our house where we live now. Anyways, my husband was gone to go on a trip with for work, and the kids were upstairs sleeping, and I had come down to get a drink and go to the bathroom. And when I came back, we have the staircase set, kind of curves just a little bit. It goes in and up. It had the door frame, no door on it. And as I'm going up, I heard like somebody kicked a door or something, the front door. And I thought, it's 2:00 in the morning. Who's going to be at the door? But I thought, okay, maybe it's just a cat or something out there scurrying around. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I knocked 3 times on the door frame of the stairs. And not 2 seconds, 3 seconds later maybe, there was 3 knocks on my door. Well, then I took off and ran upstairs because I really didn't think anybody was out there. And I went and I looked out the windows upstairs to see if there was a car in the driveway, and there's nobody in the driveway. And then I paced, and I kept thinking, maybe somebody had an accident. And was walking, and they came to my house for help. So then I forced myself to go back downstairs because I knew the doors were all locked. And instead of going to the door, I went to the side door that was in our living room at the time, because this is an older house. And I looked out that way to see if I could see anybody in the patio up front. And there's nobody. And then I wasn't going to do anything, but I finally went and looked at the door, but I didn't look straight down. Well, anyway, time I got back upstairs, I got to thinking, maybe somebody had an accident and was crawling up the steps and knocking on the door, so I had to go back down to the front door and actually open it up and look, and there was nobody there. So then I was going back upstairs, but I heard another noise. It wasn't a knock, but it was like it hit the door. And therefore I went upstairs, locked my bedroom door and with the kids, and stayed there. And I finally eventually fell asleep. And I haven't heard, well, I hear other stuff, but nothing like that.
Thank you for sticking around and hearing today's Parapals stories. Be sure you never miss a moment of the unearthly tales that await by subscribing to the show wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is independently produced, and sharing it with friends, family, and your favorite coworkers really helps immensely. Don't forget to leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to comment on the stories I shared today on social media or on Spotify. If you would like to join in and become a paranormal pen pal to have your story shared on a Parapals episode, email your story to unlockingtheparanormalpod@gmail.com, or you can submit it through the link at our Instagram and Facebook. Stay tuned for the next episode, where we will venture further into the realms of the paranormal. Until next time, stay curious, embark on the journey, and may you find the key to unlocking the paranormal.